Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leon Hartwell. I am a senior associate at LSE IDEAS. Today marks our 34th LSE IDEAS Russia-Ukraine Dialogue, a series that we launched in the aftermath of the February 2022 escalation of the war. We are part funded by PeaceRep, an international research project led by the University of Edinburgh Law School, which delivers research and tracks data on conflict and its resolution. Today, we gather here to shed light on the multi-phased consequences that have emerged from this conflict, and we will explore the intricate dynamics between Russia, Ukraine, and the Republic of Moldova. Moldova, a victim of Russian hybrid warfare, finds itself in a complex position as it navigates through the challenges posed by the Russian Federation's efforts to destabilize and control states in the former Soviet space. Moldova retains a strong Russian influence with vulnerabilities ranging from energy dependence on Moscow to low living standards, as well as two territorial units, Transnistria and Gagauzia, that can be politically manipulated at any time. Although the country does not share direct borders with Russia, it is situated between Romania and Ukraine and lacks immediate security guarantees and support mechanisms from the EU and NATO. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has added an additional layer of complexity for Moldova. Since the February 2022 escalation of the war, Moldova, a country of 2.5 million people, has received over 750,000 Ukrainian refugees, of which nearly 100,000 have chosen to stay. With the aim of fostering a comprehensive understanding of the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war in Moldova, I hope that we will get a chance to touch upon various aspects, such as the role of energy dependence on Russia, the means of Russian influence on Moldova's political environment and population, the significance of the Transnistria conflict and Russian troops' presence, as well as the situation in Gagauzia and the challenges it presents. Now, let us bear in mind the key milestones in Moldova's recent history, such as the independence in 1991, the intense armed conflict between Tiraspol and Chisinau, and the subsequent establishment of a frozen conflict with Russian troops as peacekeepers. Moreover, we cannot ignore the impact of referendums, Russian propaganda, and electronic warfare activities in Transnistria, or the growing influence of Gagauzia and its pro-Russian sentiments. As we proceed with our discussion, I encourage each of you to reflect upon the implications of these developments and their wider regional implications. To discuss these issues, I would like to welcome three very distinguished guests. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Minister Anna Revenco, the Minister of Internal Affairs of the Republic of Moldova. She previously served as an advisor to President Maia Sandu in the field of national security and as Secretary of the Supreme Security Council. Secondly, I'd like to welcome George Scutaru, founder and CEO of the New Strategy Center located in Romania. He has held a variety of government positions, and so he also comes with a wealth of experience. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome Iulian Groza, Executive Director of the Institute for European Policies and Reforms in Moldova, and former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Moldova, responsible for European integration. Welcome to all three of you. I'm going to kick off the discussion by first turning to the Minister. If you could unmute for me, please, Minister Revenco. Once again, welcome. I would like you to kick off by answering the following question. How has the February 22 escalation of the Russia-Ukraine war impacted Moldova, and how decisive will the outcome of the war be in terms of contributing to the stability or instability in Moldova? Thank you, Minister.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here. Welcome, everyone. Dear colleagues, honored to be with you at this panel. Along with the Russian aggression in Ukraine, Moldova has been put in a serious and quite complex situation when multiple and overlapping crises have emerged. It all started actually a little bit earlier than February 24th, when Russian troops aggressed Ukraine. It started with a very harsh, energetic blackmail that started just before the winter, meant to infuse fear, anxiety, distrust in the population. this is in the situation Moldova was totally dependent of international in terms of energy and gas delivery. Of course, the population was impoverished because of the huge increase and very quick increase of the prices for gas and electricity that Moldova was in a position to already start purchasing on the free market. And in this very condition, when Russian aggression started in Ukraine, Moldova being on the front line, having the longest border with Ukraine as a territory in war, of course, immediately were the first to open the houses and opened the hearts and the houses and of Moldovans in order to facilitate free and rapid entry of Ukrainians who are fleeing from the war in search of safety and search of peace. And of course, it happened very quickly overnight when we had to secure at certain period of time bare essentials and then the safety of over 120,000 refugees in just matters of days. At a certain point of time, the population of Moldova has increased with up to 4% in just a matter of a few weeks. So you'd imagine what does it mean in terms of allocation of resources and mobilization of these resources in order to keep the systems functioning and at the same time safety in our communities, security at our borders, but also safety for the refugees. Then came the disruption of the supply chain that meant that because of the blockages of the Black Sea, the trucks with grains and not only had to turn on the land, and part of them, of course, of the supply chain turned to Moldovan borders and Moldovan territory. That was quite a pressure for our infrastructure of the roads and then border. And of course, it meant an extra pressure and mobilization for all of our systems to make it possible to facilitate the transit of these grains. And in fact, this kind of supply chain is handled until now. The hybrid war has also amplified significantly after February 24th, when population was subject to very harsh radicalization. Russia has started with use of propaganda and disinformation to manipulate especially citizens of different regions and rayons of Moldova, such as Transnistria and Gagauzia, including focusing them to participate and back up the aggressive demonstrations against the authorities. Of course, it was just one after another. The public manifestations, specially paid and organized so-called protests by fugitive oligarchs and backed up also by Russia, organized in the capital of the country for weeks and months in a row, managed to take the capital in captivity, basically. And that all cyber attacks, fake bomb alerts, of course, it drained the budget. It defocused from the development programs, the government. It weakened, it was meant to weaken the system, to tear up the personnel, to drain all the available resources into managing one after another the crises. And it was also meant to infuse fear, infuse anxiety among the civil population, and all meant to alienate the population from the leaders, from the authorities, in this way to determine the destabilization and the change of the democratic course. And I must say that all of these crises were all happening in a framework of continuous, very aggressive propaganda and fake news. In what regards the last question, or the last part of the question, well, Moldova has been very decisive and very vocal about our choice, our decision. It is, we opted for the membership in the European Union. The recent poll shows almost 60% of the population being determined, affirmed pro-Europeans. Even if at the beginning of the aggression it was rather difficult for us, we were rather able only to rely on national resources, still calibrated for peace times. Throughout the months, more and more strategic and development partners came to support us. Moldova has a family right now. Its family is European Union. We are fully backed up in our development programs by the European member states. We have Frontex as an agency teaming up with us at our borders. We have been able to set up, and we are developing the EU security hub. In the end, the end of the war means connection, true connection, and integration of the Moldova into the European Union. It means a real democracy, real independence, and of course we know, and we are pretty sure that Ukraine will came victorious out of this war. That is why we stay firm to support also the Ukraine by further promoting and protecting democracy also in the region.
Thank you, Minister Revenco. I think those are some great opening remarks to kick off this discussion. Before we turn to some of the issues that you mentioned, let's hear from George also. You recently co-authored a really brilliant report on Russian hybrid warfare in Moldova. And would you like to expand on some of the challenges that Moldova is facing already? The minister mentioned a few of those, but maybe you can expand on some of those and specifically talk to us about the main tools of Russian hybrid warfare. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Leon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, dear friends from London and Chisinau. Yes, as Minister mentioned, if in Ukraine, Russia is acting by starting a large-scale conventional war against the Republic of Moldova, Russia has started massive hybrid warfare, acting on multiple levels. Russia tries to use the weakness of the state, energy dependence, pressure in politics, Transnistrian secessionism, the threat of secessionism of Gagauzia autonomies, uses Russian-speaking minorities, hostile propaganda, cyber attacks, tries to create social pressure, the influence of oligarchs such as Ilan Shor, who left the Republic of Moldova having been accused of corruption. Ilan Shor's party paid people to demonstrate against the government of the Republic of Moldova and pro-Western President Maia Sandu. The Republic of Moldova judiciary has outlawed Shor's party, which is basically a political tool of Russia used to destabilize the country. But I'm sure that our speaker from the Republic of Moldova can tell you more about Ilan Shor and the malign actions initiated by him. Russia is trying to use people's fear, inflation, prices, high prices on energy, fear for tomorrow, fear that Romanians or NATO will come, now that Ukrainians will come to, and that Moldova will be part of the war. Moscow is using Transnistria, which is a Russian-controlled area, to put additional pressure on the leadership in Chisinau. In the south, there is an autonomous region, Gagauzia, with a Turkic-speaking Orthodox pro-Russian population. There have been elections, and the governor is pro-Russian, and we are expecting new actions by the conducted by the Russian secret services to destabilize the Republic of Moldova using Gagauzia. We estimate that separatist tendencies in Gagauzia probably will increase in the last part of this year. In my opinion, this is not imminent risk of a Russian invasion of the of the Ukrainian of the Republic of Moldova, but the fate of the Republic of Moldova depends on the fate of Ukraine. If we'll have a long war of attrition lasting more than 2 years, and the West, for various reasons, decrease its support to Ukraine, then a negative development on the front and possible approach of the Russian to Mykolaiv and Odessa will greatly increase the risk also of an invasion of the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you. Thanks for those remarks, and we'll also definitely turn back to some of the issues, especially on the oligarchs also, because that's also a matter that's quite important for Moldova as part of dealing with the Russia issue. Let's first go to Iulian again for the first time now. We've talked a lot about Russia. Let's turn to Ukraine momentarily. How has the February 2022 escalation of the war specifically changed Moldova's relations with Ukraine, in your opinion? Thank you.
Thank you, Leon, and thank you, everyone who is on this panel. Very honored to be here. So briefly, well, Moldova is very much very close to Ukraine. Since the very beginning of the war, as Madam Minister has mentioned, I think it was also a proof of
I think we lost him there for a second. While we're waiting for him to rejoin us, maybe let's go to the back to the minister again. Could you perhaps talk to us about the significance of Transnistria as a separatist region with Russian troops on its territory, and how does it impact Moldova, especially since February last year?
Well, I can tell you that in Transnistria, things have been the same, but I see that Iulian is already back.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Just to come back, well, since the very beginning of the war, of course, Moldova has very much showing clear signals of support, of solidarity, and compassion towards Ukrainian people running from the war, as Madam Minister already mentioned. I think that from the first days of the war, what we try to do here in Moldova as citizens, as authorities, is really much to open our houses and support those running from the war. That was very much hitting as well in terms of capacities with the limited resources. I think what counted was really much the contribution of the citizens, and of course later the international support, which jumped in and helped the Moldovan authorities really to face all this humanitarian crisis which hit us. But even before the war, I think what was clear when in Moldova we had elected a new president, one of the first visits of the president's son was to Kiev, and since then, of course, we had a lot of kind of strategic plans to coordinate our bilateral agenda, to solve bilateral issues, but more importantly to focus on the future, on the European accession process and agenda. All that, of course, has been influenced. There were two factors, of course, which triggered very much the evolvement of our bilateral relations throughout the last 1.5 years. Of course, was the fact that Ukraine applied for membership, Moldova and Georgia then applied too, and then we, of course, worked towards getting the candidate country status. And in June last year, both countries received that candidate country status, and which very much shapes now, the new forward-looking agenda of working together in advancement towards accession process, and that very much shapes as well the high-level bilateral agenda, the governmental cooperation. What was also very important to see was the contributions that Moldova, Romania, and Ukraine had to find solutions to solve the impact of the war on the trade, on the logistics. And I think that was very much important to see that Moldova tried to rehabilitate its kind of railroad infrastructure, to look for projects with Romania to try to see developing new bridges, connections, and in that way also to contribute to the Solidarity Lane initiative, which was started by the EU. But otherwise, what we also have seen that our relationship has been evolving in is also from the security point of view, from the cooperation in that dimension. I think what we have seen greater cooperation not only in monitoring the organized crime linked kind of operations to as an effect of the war. We have seen closer cooperation between our border guards with And of course, strategic intelligence cooperation, operational cooperation, that was also very much important as part of our contribution. And I think what counted so far is that Moldova tries to play its role in helping with the limited resources, with the capacities it has to help Ukraine more in terms of humanitarian point of view, but as well Moldova is not missing from the Rammstein coalition table. Moldova is there and is trying to be there to see how Moldova can help and contribute. And by that, at the same time, I think Moldova is also looking inward in order to strengthen our own security and defense capacities, because since the war started, we have seen exposed a lot of vulnerabilities in terms of security and defense. Yes, Moldova is not now immediately affected by the conventional aggression. We have seen and discussed about the hybrid aggression, but at the same time, what was overlooked over years in Moldova was the defense and security sector. And what we have seen now, I think the government is very much prioritizing to these sectors, which is very much backed up and by the support from the European Union, from NATO countries. With the help of the EU and the European Peace Facility, Moldova managed to double its defense budget. In the next years, it will be tripled. And that is very much important. Now, as we speak, Moldova is looking into its national security strategy. That is very much important in terms of medium to long-term objectives. So yes, Moldova is trying to increase its own resilience, its own security and defense capacities, because by doing that, we also, I think, contributing both to the EU security, but also in a way creating conditions for better security in terms of Ukraine. And in that sense, I think what we have seen, here I'll stop, we've seen a tremendous support, not only financial, but also on-ground expertise and presence from the European Union. Madam Minister managed to mention already, that the EU security hub, the Frontex, but recently EU started the EU CSDP mission, a EU partnership mission here that helps Moldova, to look into its vulnerabilities, to increase its security and defense capabilities, and really address the immediate risks that we face in terms of hybrid aggression, looking at hybrid security, looking at other elements of hybrid intervention that Russia is waging in Moldova, trying to increase our security resilience and capabilities, also in terms of strategic projection, in terms of our new security strategy.
Thank you, Iulian. And this issue of solidarity with Ukraine was something that was quite evident to me. I spent about a month in Chisinau last year, and I met with a number of Moldovans also who told me that their first languages at home was Russian, but they identified as Ukrainians. And then I asked whether it was something that came, that evolved in more recent years, and they said yes when I pressed them. And I suspect it has to do with the fact that they've been observing the news and seeing what Russia's been doing in Russian-speaking places in Ukraine, and maybe some of their forefathers came from some of those places. But it would be interesting to see over time how the attitude towards Ukraine and Russia evolves within Moldova, in the coming years. Let's go back again to the minister. Minister Revenco, can you please elaborate on the issue of Transnistria? What's been happening in Transnistria since February last year? Are there any significant changes, or how your government deals with this issue? Thank you.
Well, first I must make a step back and tell you that pretty much since our independence, things have been the same with regard to Transnistria region, with inhabitants who have been years in a row manipulated and abused. They were sold illusions, and we are seeing that right now, since the aggression of Russia of Ukraine, things have started to change. People no longer can be lied as they were to before. Many of the inhabitants from that region, they go to work, or they go to study, or to travel, or they have friends who do all these things, including in EU, so they can see with their own eyes the difference when it comes to living and building your life in a democratic society, in a society that shares democratic values. So when it takes the choices with regard to well-being, to prosperity, to perspectiveness, we already see that even the inhabitants of that region, even if they are still very much disconnected from various informational sources, they are not so easy already to be subject to this kind of manipulations. So I can tell you that our policy with regard to this region is rather non-intrusive. Yes, indeed, it's a long-term policy, but it's important for us to show what does it mean for the rights of the people to be respected, for the people to be able to make independent and free choices. So that's exactly what we are aiming at. Of course, we also understand, and that was pretty sure, what is happening, what was happened in terms of the scope for 30 years with regard to Transnistria from the choices that the Russian Federation was making, is to use Transnistria as means to exercise pressure and blackmailing now on EU, but also, or rather on Ukraine, but also on EU. The geopolitical location of Moldova is pretty important for the Russians, so they are now trying with all means to regain its influence here in the region, including by, like already mentioned earlier, by various means and by aggressive propaganda and other elements of the hybrid war. It's rather important for Russia to regain its power in this region, because their capacity to stay and decide here in Chisinau means that they can transform Moldova into a real corridor and have access to the Black Sea through the Giurgiulești port. That will give them also advantages in terms of military positioning, but also influence trade that is going on Danube. That means also exercising a different kind of pressure of Ukraine from already the western border. It is pretty clear this scope of Russia behind all this aggressive campaign, conventional war, a non-conventional war that they are carrying out here in the Republic of Moldova. And for us, protecting democracy and not allowing Russia to reinstall its power and reinstall its power of the Republic of Moldova, including by dominating the political class, is crucial. And we stand pretty firm on this position. And like I said before, we are no longer alone in this effort of ours. We exchange information with our strategic partners. We've learned to communicate, we've learned to analyze, we've learned to anticipate, and we've learned how to mobilize the resources in order to prevent, discourage various threats and attempts to destabilize the country.
Thank you. Those are some great points. Also, we'll turn back to Transnistria also, but let's first go to George again to talk to us about energy dependence with Russia. George, what is the extent of energy dependence between Moldova and Russia, and what measures have been taken to promote energy independence and diversification for Moldova? Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. From the beginning, Russia creates this dependence on Russian gas, and step by step, we've seen a malign influence because all time Russia is using like a hammer, Gazprom, in Moldova and on entire Black Sea region to affect stability and independence of this country. And fortunately for Romania, we have possibility to assure 80% of our consumption of gas for domestic resources. But Republic of Moldova has always been totally dependent on gas from Russia. But this winter, with the help of the European Union, the Republic of Moldova managed to bring gas from other markets. Here, an important role was played by the interconnection with Romania, and that Romania and the EU have financed the construction of the gas pipeline from Iași in Romania to Chișinău. High energy prices, which have increased 6 times in a year and a half, have generated strong effects on economic and society in the Republic of Moldova. Inflation was around 38% last year. The government in Chișinău has launched a series of initiatives to decrease Russian pressures in the energy sector. One of the most important being the establishment of the Energy Vulnerability Reduction Fund to provide states compensation for natural gas, heat and electricity consumption to support people affected by energy crisis. The Republic of Moldova's government started in 2022 the construction of the new 400 kilowatt line between Vulcănești and Chișinău to be completed in 2025, avoiding the crossing through Ukrainian Transnistria with a total length of 158 kilometers, as well as the construction of back-to-back high voltage direct station in Vulcănești to enable the connection between the power system of the Republic of the Moldova with European network of transmission system. Now, Prime Minister Dorin Recean has declared that Moldova no longer consumes Russian gas. It is technically and commercially integrated into the European energy network. And I'm pretty sure that for the next winter, Moldova is more prepared to resist again when Russia will try to destabilize the country using the energy. And also EU knows better how can help Republic of Moldova. But I think that it's necessary to understand, especially from our friends from Western side, because for many years, we feed the beast, we feed Putin and Russian aggression with our money for cheaper gas. And we believe we had this comfort that you can avoid a war if Russia give us cheaper gas. Cheaper gas from Russia doesn't exist because finally we have lost our independence. And we lost the opportunity to be real independent in Europe. After annexation of Crimea, we lost 9 years, and finally, with our commodity, we feed the beast and we encourage him to be more aggressive.
Thank you for those points. And again, of course, energy dependence is one of those issues that's been highlighted by this war, even though it's something that we've talked about quite a bit prior to the February escalation. But there's no such thing as a that helps to sharpens the mind as a good crisis, of course. So it's been interesting to see what Moldova has done to promote diversification and also the role that's been played by Romania, which we will talk about a bit later, like you mentioned, George. Iulian, let's turn back to the issue of Transnistria. Given the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, it seems unlikely that negotiations regarding Transnistria will continue along the 5.2 format. And for the benefit of our audience, this format includes Moldova, the region Transnistria, the OSCE, Russia, Ukraine, the EU, and the US. How do you envision negotiations going forward? And how does the war affect the possibility to end the Transnistria conflict? Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. I mean, you're totally right. The 5+2 format is basically dead today. Already before the war started, it was paused back in 2019. I think since then we didn't have any formal negotiations in this format. But of course, since the war started, having two of the mediators in war, this format is not functioning, and it most likely will not function in the future as it has been established before. However, there is an interaction between the participants in this negotiations. We didn't have any formal discussions, as I mentioned, for some time, but what we have seen we have seen an increased interaction between Chișinău and Tiraspol. And that also happened since the war started. What we have seen signals from Tiraspol that in spite, Russian influence and presence in Transnistrian region, still the local leadership there, which very much is business represented, had their own interests, and their interest was very much, to keep distance from the escalation of the war, and trying, to balance between the Russian kind of influence with the business interests. And if you look at that again, this very much dictates, because the trade from the region before the war was about 2/3 directed towards the European Union. There's a lot of investments and companies which are operating in Transnistria region, trading with the EU, and of course that played an important leverage also in this unsecure environment with the war that Russia started against Ukraine, because indeed we have a lot of insecurity mounting because of the illegal presence of Russian troops in Transnistria region, because of the one of the largest munitions depot in southeastern Europe in Kobasna, which of course with the war created, increased the security risks. And of course we have seen since the war started attempts of Russia of using the Transnistria region in its war against Ukraine within a number of attempts of provocations aimed to escalate and try to create tensions in the region as well, not only in Moldova but also in the region. Since the beginning of this year, we have seen kind of resuming this type of provocations, where also you had seen, Foreign Minister of Russian Federation, Defense Ministry of Russian Federation, spreading false information and provocations about potential, military aggression from Ukraine or from Moldova, or from Moldova together with Romania, which was, of course, very much denied by all parties, because it's not in the interest, of course, of Ukraine, of Moldova, Ukraine, to see an escalation of the war. Rather, the interest is very much to keep, the stability and not to distract Ukraine from the active war zone operation in eastern part of Ukraine, and so on and so forth. But Russia, of course, is trying to use its steel influences in the region, energy as well. However, the interaction between Chisinau and Tiraspol was very much, focused on maintaining stability, kind of peace, and it was very much using the interdependencies that we still have. The energy is one of them, or the key that Moldova is still dependent, because the supply of electricity is coming today from Transnistria region, from the Russian power plant, which generates the electricity from gas. This is a temporary solution because Moldova is seeking already alternatives in terms of gas. By the way, just to add on what George has mentioned, for the first time in over 30 years of our independence, Moldova, for the first time, with the help of the European Union, with an European Bank of Investment and Reconstruction, we managed to secure cash to buy gas on the market, which for the last 8 months ensured our independence. Moldova today, with the exception of Transnistrian region, is gas independent from Gazprom. We consume the gas we bought on the market and store it in Romania and Ukraine. So that is an important, contribution to our independence. But as long as we don't have, own resources, alternative resources of power generation, we still are, connected with the power generation plant in Transnistrian region, which for now it provides, at least, from the price point of view, it provides kind of a temporary solution that helps. But just to sum up, I think when we're looking at in the months to come, of course, the attention is very much to maintain this dialogue between Chisinau and Tiraspol, very much focused on stability. We all aware that once the war will end and once Ukraine will win this war, the perspectives of the conflict settlement of Transnistrian region may enter into a new dimension. And it will provide more kind of tracks to seek for the conflict settlement. We don't see in this conflict any real kind of conflict, because this is an artificial conflict. It's a geopolitical conflict driven by Russia just to keep Moldova hostage from its transformation and development and Europeanization process. You don't have ethnic conflict. There's very much geopolitically driven conflict, and as well a conflict, or the status quo of this conflict is still provided, rent-seeking schemes for the business, which is currently, very much using the status quo, to do their own kind of business. But once the conflict, once the war, the Russian aggression against Ukraine will end, well, of course, that will provide new kind of tracks for conflict settlement, political conflict settlement. The only way Moldova is looking at the settlement is by peaceful means. Moldova never considered any other track but the peaceful settlement. That was very much part of the process. However, what we should focus on, what we see now, the authorities in Moldova are looking at, they are looking at the the reintegration policy more. The vision, strategic vision, how and what means the integration of the country in terms of economies, in terms of social aspects, in terms of companies, security, law enforcement, and all that. When we talk about reintegration of the country, we should also consider all of that, and that is something which is currently part of the discussion in Moldova to look into the kind of a more kind of medium to long-term reintegration vision, which would be based on these evidences. So once there is room for resuming the negotiations or the conflict settlement process, Moldova is ready with its own homework done in terms of what needs to be done, how much it costs, and how the reintegration process will take place. Now, again, that is something which is currently being looked at, and I think the focus on the future Transnistrian conflict settlement is very much will be shaped by the results of the end of the war in Ukraine, but at the same time, on the level of how Moldova will be prepared, on increasing its own security, its own resilience, but at the same time, getting ready for the full reintegration process.
Thank you. Yeah, there is, of course, the important thing that you mentioned there is that there is agency also on the part of Moldova, that it's not just responding to events happening around it and waiting for things to happen, but it's also actively participating and shaping the future by looking at those issues. Let's go back to Mr. Revenco again, and I'll ask all the participants to you can be fairly brief with the coming questions, and we can still go through a number of them. But I have a question for you regarding cybersecurity. What's been happening since February last year in the sphere of cyber threats, and in terms of cyber threats and disinformation? How are you responding to those threats? And I'll throw in a short question here from one of our audience members, who's saying that there seems to be quite a strong focus on the Russian dimension of in Moldova in terms of these crises. How are you planning to address protests in the future? Thank you.
Indeed, Russian Federation, the Kremlin's policy has been furiously attacking the Republic of Moldova through warfare and disinformation, aggressive, continuous propaganda, disinformation campaigns against leaders, against decisions of the government, against actions, aggressive campaigns meant to compromise the authorities with the decisions, campaigns meant to falsely put the world crises on the shoulders of the national authorities, so that to suggest that only Moscow has the solution, and the only salvation is to turn to the east, to Kremlin. We have been all together, the government, the society, on a daily basis, we become, through our actions, more and more resilient. We are seeing that in the way the public responses to this kind of campaigns. We've definitely started with banning the war propaganda, and we also ensured that the law is enforced. With regard to this kind of protests, we've conducted thorough investigations, criminal investigations. Dozens of people have been arrested. Some continue to be in state custody. There have been millions, both in national currency and foreign currency, being raised during the searches based on the search warrants issued by the prosecution. We will continue closely monitor and apply the law in each action meant to destabilize the country, including by means of organized and paid public demonstrations or public actions. We've also learned pretty quickly that information analysis, anticipation, and foresight can be also a powerful tool against disinformation. So we've consolidated our strategic analysis and strategic foresight capacities. Here we also have international development partners supporting us in these efforts. It allows us to act where we see that the threat or the risk has the largest potential to get materialized and have a great impact on the society. So therefore we can act in order to prevent or discourage this kind of actions or disinformation or fake campaigns or other hybrid war components. We also learned and we continue to consolidate our capacities in terms of strategic communication. And again, we have international partners aiding us in order to build these efforts and these capabilities meant to increase both our institutional, human, and technical resources for strategic communication. More official data is available in the public space from all relevant public governmental institutions. We share much more news related to the security topic, and not only news, but also guidance and awareness, educational, informational material for the population to encourage them seek official data, to encourage them subject to critical thinking all the information that is found apart from the non-official sources. The EUPM mission that was opened here in May is focusing in terms of support and expertise its presence here also in the area of helping the Moldovan authorities consolidate its capacities to handle and address the hybrid threats. Of course, we also are not alone when it comes to consolidating our cybersecurity. We have partners from the EU, USA is also with us. Both building a much more resilient and robust cyber system, but also security component around all the systems and information as well. I must tell you, though, that unfortunately we all, not only the Republic of Moldova, we see it everywhere in the region, continue to be pretty vulnerable in what regards the disinformation and manipulation and the fake news that are spread and available through the social networks. And here our opinion is that it takes a much more united, synchronized, coordinated efforts on all European level.
Thank you, Minister. And that's great. The responses that you've had so far, it really seems like you have your plate full at present. So I don't envy what you're doing. Let's turn to George again. George, last year I had some very interesting conversations. I met with your ambassador, the Romanian ambassador to Moldova, and he was telling me about what Romania and some of the other EU members are doing in support of Moldova. And I thought Romania's role was particularly interesting because you've also gone through the whole path all the way to getting into the EU. You've had to adopt legislation, you've had to reinvent language in the Romanian language that did not exist before in order to make certain changes and adopt new laws and regulations. And so to a certain extent, because of some of those, because of the overlap, the linguistic overlap between, Romania and Moldova, Moldova is able to benefit from some of those aspects, some of those lessons learned, and even the physical language that you've used in the road to getting into the EU. Can you talk to us a bit more about what Romania and other EU members are doing in supporting Moldova? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because we not have so much time, I'll be focused on energy, because the energy, it's one of the most sensitive issue for Republic of Moldova, taking into account the pipeline network, the huge dependence on gas before the war, and especially this relationship between Transnistria and the Republic of Moldova. And Iulian explained very well the relationship with Kuchurgan power plant. The Republic of Moldova managed to get through the winter with the help of Romania, the EU, and the USA. And Romania provide low-cost electricity, gas, oil, wood. We send funds, as did the EU, so that Republic of Moldova could compensate for the high energy prices for many people in this country. Another objective of the bilateral agenda of the authorities in Bucharest and Chisinau is the creation of a common energy market between Romania and the Republic of Moldova. For instance, in August last year, the state electricity operators of the Republic of Moldova and Romania, Moldelectrica and Transelectrica, signed a commercial agreement for electricity transactions, which allow Republic of Moldova to procure energy from a Romanian market. Also, from 24 to 27, Romania will start a comprehensive process of building critical infrastructure in the exclusive economic zone for the exploitation of gas resources in the Neptune perimeter. By accessing this reserve, Romania can not only cover all its gas consumption, but also help countries like Republic of Moldova. With gas from the Black Sea, Romania can permanently remove the Republic of Moldova from Russia's energy blackmail. I think that the 2027 momentum is the most important, because Romania will have enough gas to do this. We are talking about at least 100 billion cubic meters, and the Republic of Moldova's consumption is around 1.5 BCM without Transnistria. And I think that this gas from the Black Sea will be useful for foreign companies, British, American, EU, who will want to come to Romania to produce building materials and then to be present in Ukraine when the reconstruction process will start. When you talk about Ukraine, we also think about increasing connectivity between Romania and Ukraine, but you must also consider Republic of Moldova. We could talk about a triangle: Romania, Ukraine, and Republic of Moldova, vital for interconnection, for the access of foreign companies to the reconstruction of the southern part of Ukraine, which is close to Romania and the Republic of Moldova, an area that was very destroyed by Russians. I mean, Nikolaev, Kherson, Zaporozhye, and Donbass. It is much easier, for instance, for a company to be in Romania, a NATO and EU member country under the protection of Article 5, a country that will have cheaper gas resources in a short time. But I want to underline what Madam Minister mentioned last time, and I think that now Republic of Moldova is better prepared to act against Russian hybrid aggression. And please take into account that at the EU level, we'll have 11 elections this year and next year, including elections for EU Parliament. And Russia will have plenty of momentum when Russia will try to act against our cohesion and our stability, because for Putin, most important is to decrease the support for Ukraine. Even they are so brave, it's impossible to resist without ammunition and without armament. And it's necessary to stand together and to understand how they are acting in hybrid warfare. And this Moldova's experience is very valuable for Western countries to understand how Russia is acting and how Russia is trying to undermine this support against Putin's regime, this support for Ukraine, and especially how Russia is acting against our democracies.
Thank you. And I'll certainly be watching this space in terms of what Romania will be doing in kind of navigating between the EU and Moldova. I think you play a very important role in terms of that. So I'm glad you're also part of this discussion, George. Iulian, let's talk a little bit about refugees. Of course, the number of Ukrainian refugees entering into Moldova has been quite high. How has Moldova managed the situation? And then I'm going to just throw in a very brief question also by one of the individuals online who's asking whether there's any value in Moldova, whether you see any value for Moldova engaging the Russian resistance. We're talking here about intellectuals, artists, academics who oppose this war. Very briefly, thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Briefly, as we already tried and touched a bit on the way how Moldova basically, managed the humanitarian crisis since the war started, I just briefly highlight 3 points. Of course, limited resources. Moldova was not prepared for such huge, migration inflow, refugees inflows. I think the estimations that I remember were, at least 5 times less than we had faced in the first weeks of the war. And I think what counted a lot, was, the sense of compassion and solidarity and implications, basically participation of the whole community in the effort. You have seen, just civil society organizations, activists, just people driving towards the borders just to provide the first, aid and assistance and bring people to their homes and houses. I think that was crucially important. I mean, there was even an initiative called Moldova for Peace Initiative, which was launched by a group of civil society organizations, which before, we had the detachment of the UNHCR mission here, and the nationals came to help us to manage the whole humanitarian process. The citizens, the society was very much working with, the Minister of Interior, the government, to cover those immediate needs. So that was really important. With limited resources, we managed to mobilize ourselves and actually to face about a 5% increase in our population just in a matter of a few months, of 1 month, which was, of course, very important. Then, of course, we had to manage with the fact that we had to provide opportunities, and we seen the government providing opportunities for Ukrainian citizens. I mean, to get a job here. Almost half of the refugees are children, of course, providing the opportunity for getting into kindergartens or schools. All that was very much important. Linked to that, of course, as the authorities also have to face, with other challenges linked to the increased inflows, had to, also to manage or to provide guarantees, social guarantees, and not only for the refugees. But here, of course, in the 1 month or so after the first days of the war, what counted was the international support, and the fact that EU and Moldova, EU enacted the civil protection mechanism. Moldova benefited from the support from this mechanism, and I think that was very much important. But just to in a way to conclude, if I may, because in spite of all these challenges that Russian aggression against Ukraine generated, which is still, I mean, all the threats and risks are still there. I think what we've managed to see over the last 1.5 years is that Moldova's resolve to pursue its own path has never been stronger. And I think for Moldova, the war has, in essence, underscored the contrast between the vision towards the European Union, peaceful, prosperous Europe, to go towards that direction, and the instability and the security that Russia brought here. Basically, as a result, Moldovan society has been more is more anchoring itself towards the European Union, and at the same time, by increasing our own understanding and improving our own understanding of the real realities and challenges that Russia is provoking in Ukraine, in the region, in Moldova. I think we're navigating away as a country from this influence with the help of our partners, with the help of our friends, increasing our independence, security, resilience. I think that is very much important. Well, however, we have to continue to engage with the Moldovan public, because in Moldova we have about 20 to 25% of Moldovan citizens which are still, connected to the Russian world, that are manipulated by proxies, and they are very much instrumentalized in the hybrid war of Russia here in Moldova. So this means that we really need to more invest in not only in communication, in outreach to the public, and explaining, debunking all the information, but more importantly, fighting disinformation. Not only on traditional media, but online space is very much something which is used, and at the same time is most difficult to address. So I think continuous effort in that sense will be crucial, and I think. Just one more point in looking a bit in the future, what counted a lot for Moldova to manage the humanitarian crisis, the economic crisis, the energy crisis, was the support, and the support which was coming from the EU, from the US, from our partners, signaling very much not only politically that we are not alone, but actually helping us. Romania, Germany, France launched a special support platform to fundraise for projects, programs of investment, of aid for Moldova. This will continue, but as Moldova is now being a candidate country to become member of the European Union, advancing the EU accession process to the European Union, it will be the best and fastest way to support Moldova's independence, transformation, economic development, and long-term security.
Yeah, and thank you for the point also that you made on the Russian population. That it's part of the makeup of your country. It's not a matter of whether to engage that segment of your society, but how to engage them. It remains important. Minister, I know you need to go, but if you have just 1 minute, just answer one more question for us, please. And feel free to drop off after that. I have a very brief question for other two panelists, but please, I ask everyone to be super short, then we can conclude this. This discussion has been really interesting, but Moldova started a process of de-oligarchization, which in essence is a process of reducing Russian intrusion at the political and economic level. Can you talk to us about the process and the importance thereof? And I'm asking this also because one of our audience members won grant from the UK Defence Forum. He worked for UBAM in Chisinau, was asking also about whether you have any lessons regarding Banca de Economie, the laundromat, regarding exposing activities of oligarchs. Thank you.
Yes, well, it is indeed the reality that the oligarchs, the Russian-led or the Russian-backed oligarchs have impoverished the country for 30 years, have been confiscating the democratic values from our people, and again, manipulating and abusing individuals, communities, the systems, the economy, politically, but also commercially speaking. And that was happening for over 30 years. Now, in the recent years, and especially in the last months, I could also say that actions have been undertaken in a quite firm and sustainable manner to hold these oligarchs, hold accountable, bring to justice. And this is happening at several levels. Internally, I can tell you that we indeed started first to operate and clean up the systems. We've launched investigations that have never been started before. We have seized the assets. We have sought international arrest warrants against knowledgeable oligarchs, again, that have been put aside for years. We promoted legislation that allowed us to advance with the investigations, including allowing to hold trials in the absence of these oligarchs, because we are seeing that they are trying to flee from the justice by hiding in other jurisdictions, and that is indeed both impeding the investigations and at the same time on the international level. First, we've worked quite intense all together, the public authorities, but also the civil society, to increase the awareness of the international community about the dangers of the actions of these oligarchs, about the actions that have been financially supported by these oligarchs meant to destabilize the country and radicalize the population by various means, including by those type of paid protests that I've referred to a little bit earlier. And of course, that helped us. We also managed to advance along with the partners, international development partners, with partners from the civil society, to prepare all the necessary information and launch investigations meant to bring these oligarchs to justice by stopping them from controlling their assets. So we are seeing how the list of these oligarchs is getting bigger and longer on the list of sanctions imposed by both USA and EU. And of course, like I said, that means that they are no longer be able to freely operate and manipulate with these assets that were enabling them to exercise power and influence on important decisions. Last week, we've seen how the court decided to outlaw one party, the Show Party, that was freely and openly backing up the actions meant to destabilize the situation in the country. The government remains committed and has a strong anti-corruption agenda. These are just a few examples I brought to your attention. We continue to stay firm, and we are seeing that on the firmer we are, the more results are coming, and we are absolutely confirmed and certain that these oligarchs will be brought to justice and will serve their sanctions so that we will be able to protect our democracy and our systems at place meant to build well-being for the entire country. And of course, we are quite firm in this decision and efforts of ours because, like I said at the beginning, we are not alone. We have strong support from our development partners, from the EU, from the USA. We benefit of large expertise, of good practice and information and experience sharing. It is something that we also use as platforms to share our own experience and challenges, because these times, as also has been mentioned by both Iulian and then George, is also an important opportunity for us to learn in order how to become more resilient for the future.
Thank you, Minister. I think those are I think you live in exciting times also, and I've just been very impressed with the amount of rapid reforms that Moldova has put on the table over the past few, year and a half alone. So congratulations on that. And please feel free to drop off if you need to go. I am going to ask one brief question to the other two panelists also. But
thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you, colleagues, and let's stay connected, as there is quite a dynamic agenda, and it's important that we exchange timely information, allowing us to intervene where we are most needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Goodbye.
George, very briefly, what measures has Ukraine taken to deter a possible Russian attack from Transnistria?
Ukraine's resistance means that Russia cannot occupy Odessa and from there cannot attack the Republic of Moldova further. Ukraine's victory will totally change the way the Transnistria conflict can be resolved, because the separatist authorities in Tiraspol can no longer count too much on Russia, and they will no longer be able to rely on support from Ukraine, as was the case until 2014. I think that Chișinău will have enough leverage to accelerate the reintegration of Transnistria. The 5+2 negotiating format with Russia and Ukraine are at the same table as mediator is dead in the current circumstances. And Republic of Moldova, Romania, and Ukraine all have the interest not having this frozen conflict maintained by Russia, nor a possible new Kaliningrad near Romanian EU and NATO border. The Russian military contingent in Transnistria has around 1,600 troops with all the weaponries. They are not a direct danger to Ukraine. This contingent could have a military role only in the case of a hostile offensive operation against Odessa. This is why the Ukrainians bombed the bridge linking Tiraspol to Odessa in March 22. Also in Transnistria, in Kobasna, only 2 kilometers from the border with Ukraine, Russia has under control the largest ammunition depot in Europe, over 20,000 tons of ammunition. No one knows what condition this ammunition is in. This depot contains ammunition that belonged to Soviet army deployed to Czechoslovakia and Eastern Germany and were located here in the 90s with the withdrawal of Russian troops from these countries. As I said before, this is no imminent risk of Russian military attack against the Republic of Moldova. But in case of a war of attrition that will continue in the next 2-3 years, and if Russia manages to take the initiative again, then the risk increases. I'm convinced that if the military situation would allow it, Russia will not only create a land bridge between Crimea and Transnistria, but would also occupy the Republic of Moldova. This is why for the Republic of Moldova, Ukraine resistance and Ukraine's military success against Russia, it's so important.
Thank you. That's some really great points there also. And thank you for highlighting the interconnectedness of security in the region. Iulian, just to close us off very briefly in a sentence or two, I don't know whether polling is big in Moldova, but do you have any thing to share with us regarding the attitudes of Moldovans towards the EU, NATO, and Russia and Ukraine since last year, February, with a, I don't know if there are any polls that you can maybe refer to from the top of your head.
Sure. Briefly, in terms of EU accession, what we have seen an increase of support in the last 1 year and a half. When Moldova applied to join the European Union and Moldova got the candidate country status, the support for EU accession in Moldova increased by 5 points already, and that is a tendency which is kept today. 2/3 of Moldovans want for Moldova to join the European Union, and I think the basis of these bases may increase to about 70 to 75% at least in the next 1 year and a half and two, depending on the process of accession, depending on how we are increasing our internal resilience and securing our information space, because that is very much the vulnerability we still face today, where we see the effort of Russia being directed. In terms of NATO accession, I think what we have seen in the last 1 year and a half, we have seen an increase of support for NATO accession in Moldova from 24% to just today was published another poll that showed a public support of about 35%. So about 10% increase in 1 year and a half for Moldova's accession to the European Union. At the same time, I think what we also see, and the same poll indicates that about 55% of Moldovans still believe that neutrality is a tool for ensuring our security in face of an aggressor. I have to mention that number has decreased over the last 1 year and a half. So more and more people understand in Moldova that neutrality is not a guarantee of Moldova's security. Well, still there is still a majority which believes so. What it is important to mention, I think the public discourse, the political discourse has been shaped first by the war. I mentioned already before that for the first 30 years since our independence, our budget, defense budget has been doubled. Well, the baseline is very low to see the double. I mean, from 45 million to now about 100 million euros. I mean, for a country like Moldova, it's still a very low defense budget. And I think what it is important here is that not only to increase, defense capabilities, resources, that is currently being matched by the support coming from the EU, European Peace Facility, other partners, NATO countries, states that helping us, but as well by investing more, in our, professional army, addressing vulnerabilities in terms of security setup, critical infrastructure, increasing our cybersecurity capabilities, and of course, as I mentioned, as the hybrid, as disinformation and propaganda is the main tool to wage this hybrid aggression, that should be our priority. Beyond last point, I mean, fighting corruption, limiting the space of kleptocrats, bringing them to justice, recover assets. That is also very important, because while the kleptocrats today are fugitive, they're not in the country. They still have access to resources that they use in their own interests, and very much what we have seen that their interest is also very much interfering with Russians' agenda here. And just one point, last point, I think what counted in last half a year was the important political decisions that our partners have made. US first, by putting on the sanctions list the kleptocrats, including for the first time a political party, which was Shore. Then we had UK doing that. Just recently, EU established a special regime of sanctions and established the first list of sanctioned kleptocrats, and Canada following. So that is very important for the the anti-corruption effort, the fight with kleptocrats, but as well as limiting their space to being used as Russia's proxies in the country, and at the same time securing a more sustainable process of recovery of assets which have been stolen from the country for years.
Thank you, Iulian. And it's remarkable how fast some of these attitudes internally have changed in Moldova as a direct result, you can argue, of a seemingly exogenous factor. I'm looking forward to getting back to Moldova in the near future and to see firsthand also some of the changes that you are making. I am really energized by it. And I think that brings us to the end of our event. I apologize that we went over time, but it was a really interesting discussion. I'd like to thank all three of our guests, Anna Revenco, George Scutaru, and Iulian Groza. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.